Welcome to ChalkTalk, a series of videos where we explain complex technologies with just one chalkboard. In this video, we're looking at Varnish and how it can fit into your infrastructure. Specifically, we're looking at Varnish in detail, how it works and how it moves client and server requests together. Varnish is a piece of technology that sits between your client and your server to make things faster. Here's how that looks. Your client, happy behind his laptop, is going to make a connection to your server to access your website. It is going to connect to Varnish, this entire box, and Varnish is going to make a lookup inside of its cache to see if it already has a response for that particular page. If it doesn't, Varnish will, on its own, make a request to your actual web server. This is where your PHP will hit, your database, your Redis, your API calls. This is the part that takes a while to generate a page. Once that payload is done, Varnish will send it back, or the web server will send it back to Varnish. Varnish will store that inside of its cache and deliver it to the end user. The next time someone visits the exact same page, or the same user comes back, Varnish will make the same lookup in its cache, but this time it will already have the exact same HTML payload. And it can deliver it back to your client in milliseconds instead of seconds. Each of these blocks, the part where your user connects to Varnish, the part where Varnish connects to your web server, are areas that we or you can fine-tune. You can add logic to remove cookies, remove URL parameters, perhaps normalize your host header. All of this can be done in this block. Additionally, if you make a request to your backend to connect to the slow web server, you can add debug headers, you can add additional information to give you an idea on the server side what your client has been requesting. So additional headers, you can manipulate cookies, etc. Once the server is done doing all of its thing, you hit another block within Varnish that you can also fine-tune. You can add, remove headers, and you name it. Then you enter the caching part, which is the heart, the bread and butter of Varnish itself, where you can fine-tune what defines a particular URL. If I visit your site versus my colleague would visit your site, and you have, say, a shopping basket, will be different. The cache is where you determine what parameters to use to identify my request versus that of my colleague. And the VCL deliver part is the last part before your data is sent to a client, and the last place where you can clean up. Say you had the debug headers, that you can still remove them before delivering them to your client. At the end of the day, what you want is a fast experience for your visitor. You do this by fine-tuning Varnish, which is a C-like configuration syntax. It's a VCL file, the Varnish configuration language, and you can program Varnish or the proxy in between to do what you want. You can program it to drop headers, you can program it to add headers, you can program it to rewrite certain URLs to other URLs. It's a very complex and a very extensive configuration file to do things in. The tricky part is, where do you draw the line between what your web server does versus what Varnish does? That's a fine line to walk, because ideally you keep Varnish as lightweight and as simple as possible and do everything inside of your PHP or your Perl or your Ruby application. But Varnish gives you the ability to fine-tune every aspect of it. What can be the difference is your site can go down with 10 users, or it can survive with 10,000 users just by adding Varnish in the middle of the mix. To remember here, Varnish will be a complex piece of technology that we can help you configure. And ideally you keep it as simple as possible and do all of the application logic within your actual application. In the next videos, we'll look at content strategies for your website, how to debug Varnish, and how to get started. Talk to you next time.